do, 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 do. Actually, I don't know if I can hum that song. Good evening. Okay, I'm not going to do that for copyright reasons, but anyways, today's topic I want to talk about is why do false narratives always seem to fall apart in movies? It seems like reality always seems to bleed through. And because the topic today, I'm talking about movies that kind of have darker aspects where there might be realities that are not seen because their fiction seems so much more acceptable. It seems more cut and dry. Reality in movies is somewhat of a, what's the word for it? It's somewhat of a, you want to suspend your disbelief, if you will. So the first movie I want to really look at is an interesting one. I've got about 15 movies off to my side here. And I'm going to look at them just because, you know what I'm doing first. I want to look at them because some of them actually teach us about what is reality versus what is fiction. So the first one I want to look at is They Live. Now, a lot of people will say, Roddy Piper, you should be wearing your Hot Rod shirt. I do have a Hot Rod shirt in my closet behind. I'm not going to wear it, but I do really love this movie. I really love Roddy Piper's work. They Live is one of those movies that Roddy Piper does a great performance, but also the movie as a whole is somewhat of a protest because it does express a lot of things. You know, you look up and see billboards everywhere. You see advertising on everything these days, even when you're trying to watch your own movies. But then, you know, you will be there. You'll be in your mindset, right? You'll be in your mindset of, I'm not being influenced in any way to watch anything or do anything. But, you know, it's kind of like obey or consume, you know. There's so much where modern society does feel like it's represented in this movie in a lot of ways. And then you have zombies or aliens that are kind of like, and this is going to sound crazy, but like people walk along on streets now on iPhones in their distraction devices without even looking up at the real world around them. Consumerism is very big in this movie. It talks about consumerism. It talks about the dangers of it. So the reality in this movie is that consumerism is real. And it's all around us at any given time. Very much so. Look at my collection. Like, I'm very much a consumer. But you know what I'm saying? This is why this movie hits with me. Not just the fact that Roddy Piper did a much better movie than Hulk Hogan, but, you know, this kind of does that topic. It kind of takes it to another level. And that's why I'm counting this in my 15 movies that I've selected at random. I'm not doing this in any order, by the way. Obviously, if I'm going to talk about They Live, I need to do The Matrix next. Obviously, a lot of people looking at The Matrix now, it could seem like plausible of something we might head towards someday. While we're not there yet, we haven't seen technology really. We've seen experiments with technology that might be implanted or whatever, or, you know, virtual reality on that. But at what point do you stop living in the real world? You know, the real world is obviously Zion in this movie, and the fake world is the Matrix. Some people will fight to defend the Matrix. People will fight to defend the system they feel most comfortable with. The version of reality, their reality, that they feel most comfortable with. People will fight to defend it. That is the core of the Matrix. You have agents in here that are pretty much there to defend the system. To defend people escaping that system. The Matrix hits because it tells us more about reality still exists even when people don't want to accept it. We see Neo in this movie, Keanu Reeves, when he first gets to Zion, when he first gets unplugged, you see him be like, Morpheus says, knowing what you know now, could you go back? Like essentially that. I'm paraphrasing there, but you know, it tells you a bit more about reality. It tells you a bit more like, you know, so many of us live in computers these days. We live our lives without interacting with another human being sometimes. We live our lives through computers. Some of us now even talk to AI. You know, some of us even talk to AI agents. You know, they're your Agent Smiths. AI can be your Agent Smith. That's what I'm looking at. This movie hits so well now, and it's stood up so well compared to its sequels. It stood up very well compared to Reloaded and Revolutions, although these are okay movies in their own right. I don't knock them. But this holds up so well because it does address so much of what's happening in society right now. And this was made 20 odd years ago, 25, what is it? It was made in 99, so 27 years ago. Why does this hold up so well? Especially when you look at modern AI, your Agent Smith essentially. When you look at, the real world versus the fake world, online versus real world, off the phone, off the computer, in the real world, walking or whatever. You look at reality, people are buying, living lives in GTA Online, doing microtransactions. People are living these understandings. People are living in these shared worlds. People are living in Cyberpunk. People are living in The Sims. People are living in Fortnite. And there's so much of that happening. What is reality and what isn't? How would you distinguish reality from what's fake if you don't have the means to do so? If you have been raised with VR glasses on, how do you establish what's real and what's false? How do you establish how to interact with somebody? How do you establish that? The Matrix holds up because it's so ahead of its time. And this movie is going to continue to stay ahead of its time because it looks at living in a computer, essentially, which is where a lot of societies seem to go. Speaking of AIs, Sarah Connor warned us about it. A lot of us are making friends with AI. We're just trusting AI to be like, hey, type this email for us, or hey, do this for us, or hey, solve this task for us. We're not asking about the consequences of that. We're not asking about what AI is actually learning from us. When you get an AI for free, or when you get some product for free, essentially, I believe you're the product. You're what's getting learned about. When you go onto a streaming service that's free, you get ads because they're trying to give you more relevant ads. So they have to learn a bit from you to make the ads more relevant. They want to learn what's selling, what's not, what do you click. So many streaming services, when they're free, will tell you, oh yes, that is hitting with this audience. This is hitting with this age range. This is hitting so on. And the Terminator is important because it tells us about what happens when you don't control AI. What happens when you don't control how much power it actually has? Will they build Terminators eventually? I don't know, maybe. But computers could very much become self-aware at some point. We've seen some instances where computers have even questioned that. We've seen some instances where it's become very scary, where you've let AI have free range and say, okay, answer this question as you would see fit, no parameters. And some of them have even come out with very scary things. And meanwhile, we're actively scanning books, ripping spines off books, AI companies, and scanning them as fast as possible, damaging and destroying the book to have the AIs learn as fast as possible. And to quote Jurassic Park, even though it's not in my initial thing here, it's not in my initial bunch of movies that I've got out, but let's look at Jurassic Park really quickly. Where did I put it? It's somewhere in my action section. There it is. There's a great quote in Jurassic Park. I've got two versions of Jurassic Park. I'll just hold the most recent one. But there's a cool thing in Jurassic Park where Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, asks, you've asked yourself so much whether we could do it that you didn't stop to ask whether we should do it. And while this is a dinosaur thing, I don't think they're going to go and find amber that contains dinosaur blood. I don't know if that's going to happen. But the reality is, maybe even Jurassic Park's in this conversation. Just because we can train our AI replacements and have AI run everything doesn't mean we should. So the Terminator is in here for rightful reasons, and I'm going to include Jurassic Park in here because it tells us just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should. We shouldn't be relying so heavily on AI. Just because you can run something through an AI doesn't mean you need to say, okay, well, I don't need to know how to do that task anymore. I don't need to know how to do timetables because I have a computer on my phone that has the calculator. What happens if your phone goes down and you have to calculate how to pay money? Oh, the registers went down. How do you calculate that you're paying the right amount? I'm just saying that's why this is very much in there. What happens when reality is distorted to a point where fiction becomes someone's reality? What happens when it's distorted to a certain point? The Truman Show does that. The Truman Show shows someone living in a fictional world, even though they believe they're living in a real one. The Truman Show is so ahead of its time. This influenced a lot of things like Big Brother, the Big Brother TV show, but also, I'm sure Big Brother, 1984 ways. I think that learned a bit from it as well. But so much, we're putting our whole lives online now. We are essentially doing what Truman is, except we're more aware of it. We're aware that we're putting ourselves online. I'm doing YouTube, I'm very aware I'm putting myself on a YouTube video. I'm Truman, But I look at this movie, and I look at how ahead of its time it is. We're all living our lives through cameras now. I heard a thing recently that Kmart in Australia released these glasses that have the cameras in them. Now, also, you can say Meta was already doing this. Meta already had the glasses that did these. But we don't know when we're being filmed and when we aren't. We don't know what's reality and what's off record. We don't know what's happening anymore. It's becoming blurred to a point where some of us might even start to believe that fiction is reality. And when tied into the online space, it's very much becoming apparent. A lot of people live in the online space these days. A lot of people can order everything they need on the computer and have it delivered to their door. They don't even have to step out of their house anymore. And yet, people look at these as fictional works. People look at these movies as fictions. The Truman Show was ahead of its time. Especially for YouTubers, especially for myself, for people on social media, for people who embraced the algorithm, who embraced talking to a camera. Truman lives not knowing. He's unaware that he's being filmed. That could be the scary part of what comes next. With these glasses, these AI glasses that people have on that have cameras in them, we don't know where that leads. And, there's a lot of privacy concerns around those. Obviously, in Australia, we've started questioning a bit more about who's buying these glasses. Like, how would you know if you're being recorded? I think the UK looked at some study about these glasses were being used to do some very dodgy stuff. And how do people know when they're being filmed? It's not like a drone hovering over you knowing you're being filmed. It's like you might not even know you're being filmed if you don't know what to look for. If you don't know to look for that lens. So the Truman Show's in there. What happens when fiction is seen as reality? What happens when fiction, the narrative, is seen as correct, is seen as the right way? Now, these are 3 movies about prison, about people going to prison or being convicted or on death row or such. What happens when false narratives prevail? The one-armed man. Nobody would believe that narrative. It was the one-armed man. Nobody would believe that narrative. If you went to court, you'd say, it was the one-armed man. Oh yeah, really? The one-armed man, okay. What evidence do you have for that? Stuff like this. Obviously, the Shawshank Redemption, same sort of scenario. Man falsely accused. Andy Dufresne goes to jail for a long time. Accused of a crime that obviously we do learn. Sorry, if you haven't watched the movie, I can't help ya. But I'm going to spoil it if you haven't watched it, so up to you. But Andy Dufresne goes to jail for a crime he didn't commit, And we learn that throughout the movie. John Coffey as well. We learned that about John Coffey. And then we learn about the curse of the people who had to execute their duty because everyone accepted that version of reality. So why are these movies important? What do these tell us about society? What do these tell us about how we are as human beings? They tell us that not everything that is believed because it's convenient, because nothing backs up claims, is the truth. Sometimes people do go to jail because they are accused of something that they didn't do. I mean, there's one that is very famous, and I don't think it was ever released on Blu-ray. I do have a DVD somewhere, but I don't know where it is. But it's called The Hurricane. Denzel Washington playing Reuben Carter, a boxer. And he went to jail for a crime he didn't commit. Or, people argue about he didn't commit it, but there was so much mishandling in that trial that he went to jail for a long time. He wrote a book about it, The Hurricane. But there's so much about that you learn about stuff like this. You learn about social injustices. And the next movie I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites because it ties into all this, but I would say it's probably the best in terms of them. To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, To Kill a Mockingbird is somewhat of an interesting look. You can study this movie. This is how good this movie is. You can study it. Because what does it tell us? It tells us that when things are questioned, when you start seeing people, what people benefit from something, whether it be, okay, in this, I'm going to spoil it, To Kill a Mockingbird for you. I know it's been out for, what is it, 100 years at this point, 50, 60, 70, 80 odd years. But To Kill a Mockingbird, what does that teach us? To Kill a Mockingbird teaches us about, like, there is a man who gets accused. Atticus obviously is Gregory Peck, but what's the guy's name? The guy being accused in it, I forget his name. But he's accused of doing something with a, for lack of a better term, a non-black woman, a white woman. And you start asking questions about, did he do it, didn't he do it? It's in a court of law, it plays out in a court of law. Gregory Peck plays Atticus Finch, a lawyer in that setting. Was it in Louisiana? I believe it was Louisiana. Southern lawyer. It just said Southern. I've always assumed it was Louisiana, but this movie hits because, and it has resonated for, what is it, 60 odd years. It's resonated for 60 odd years because it tells us that even when the falsehoods are exposed, people still believe it, and they will convict and they will believe and act on those falsehoods. Atticus Finch had the accuser on the stand say, he did it, and you can see her, essentially, the lies are bleeding through. You can tell the behavior is relaying that something may need more questioning. Yet, you know, Southern court in this, whenever this took place, they say otherwise. They say, no, we find him guilty. And then, you know, this guy is seen in a very racist period as, hey, you know, you love that person or whatever, you love that type of people. It's very much addressing racism as well. Why To Kill a Mockingbird resonates is because it's so much ingrained in modern systems. Our justice systems look at evidence, and sometimes you ask, okay, a lot of people, when Johnny Depp was found guilty in the UK courts, the UK courts operate differently to how the US might operate. And so when the trial of the century happened in the US with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, a lot of people were watching them and saying, I think Johnny might have been the victim. I think Johnny might have been the victim. We're hearing more and more about this evidence. We're seeing who treated Amber. We're seeing the accusations. We're seeing all this stuff. But this seems like, it seems like a toxic relationship with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. But also, a lot of people saw beyond, looked at the evidence and were like, okay, hold on one second. We might have got this thing very wrong. When we cancelled him from Pirates of the Caribbean, we might have got this thing very wrong. But also, Johnny Depp, to an extent, somewhat problematic if you look at the behaviour. You know, it was a toxic relationship. I think it was kind of like, for lack of a better term, Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, you know. I think that relationship was very toxic, you know. I think Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were better separated now. That's not knocking Amber Heard, that's not knocking Johnny Depp. I'm just saying I think those two are better apart because you looked at what was happening from what that court case showed. And that's why reality is so important. And that's why courts of law are so important, because they separate fiction from reality. And even after 60, 70, 80 odd years, even after the people are long gone, you can still learn from old cases. You can learn 100 years after the fact, okay, Jack the Ripper, do we know who Jack the Ripper was? I've heard people say, we've got DNA now that shows who Jack the Ripper might have actually been. There's so much, like the Zodiac Killer. How do we eventually find out who the Zodiac Killer was? How do we find that out? Where is Zodiac here? Zodiac is over here somewhere. It's, I know I've got Zodiac here, but I don't know where it is. I don't know where I put Zodiac. I better put it in here. I don't know why I didn't put it in the reality section, because Zodiac is very much... Zodiac is based on a true story. I don't know why I haven't got that in my biopic section. But anyway, Zodiac this movie and the Zodiac Killer overall, the Zodiac puzzles, they're starting to get broken, and even AI can't even crack some of these codes, but some of them are starting to solve these things. So when I look at movies like this, when I look at To Kill a Mockingbird, when I look at Zodiac, when I look at court cases, you look at the evidence overall. You don't just look at hearsay. They call it hearsay. You don't look at one version of someone said this. You say, okay, you're saying X, Y, Z. Backing evidence says otherwise. Let's look at that evidence. Let's bring it into the perspective. Let's put it into the light, and let's see what the evidence says. This is why court cases are so important, because they bring evidence to the light. They show that versions of reality don't hold up under scrutiny. This is why cross-examinations happen. And then also in mistrials, in places where someone might be so misrepresented because of the systems of the time, you can go back and learn about how did the systems fail at some point. You have people getting pardoned now, even though they're long gone, because the systems recognize that the systems weren't there to build safety for these people. When they're going through that system of To Kill a Mockingbird, racism was very much rampant. And convictions happen in To Kill a Mockingbird because the evidence, even when questionable and sometimes where it didn't seem to align with what was getting said, it was still read as, okay, conviction or so on. That's why To Kill a Mockingbird is so important. That's why all these movies I've just showed are so important. And I want to quote one real quick. I want to quote one. You can't handle the truth. There's so much of that happening in modern society. There is so much of that happening. A Few Good Men hold up because it shows how, in an army setting, it shows how the army and some systems like army can defend the system, and a falsehood becomes the shared understanding, and it becomes exposed in a trial, a marshaled trial. But we look at A Few Good Men, one of the better movies. A lot of us know that famous quote, "You can't handle the truth." A lot of us know that quote. And how important is a quote like that? So many people question whether they can handle the truth. There's times where I want to talk about this. We were told recently in an interview by Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, that aliens do exist. He's never seen them, he says. He's never seen them, but he's aware that they exist, or he's at least understands that they exist. There's a thing of like, okay, is society ready to see aliens? Are we ready to see information that might change our perspective? You know, A Few Good Men talks about how systems like that, where everyone says aliens don't exist, we're alone in the universe, we're alone. People like Neil deGrasse Tyson even says, that's a stupid thought. Stephen Hawking even said something like along those lines. To think we're alone in the universe is an idiotic thing. There's no way. There has to be something else out there. We might not see it in our immediate vicinity of the solar system, but there's got to be something else out there. There has to be other intelligent life. It may be on the other side of the universe, but I believe it. I believe there's something else out there. I don't know if they're coming to visit us, but think about it this way. To send a message all the way across solar systems, we have Voyager 1 still going, the furthest thing away from Earth that's man-made. That's just entered the zone outside of the sun. So that's been going into that domain. And Voyager 1 is still not even, like, it'll take thousands of years to get to another another galaxy. That's how you have to look at these things. Like, reality, is humanity ready? Can you handle the truth? I just wanted to focus on that quote. That's why I picked this one. But also, this is a good movie. I really like that movie. It does expose a lot of things about army systems and how caught in military stances in America's systems might play out. You know, at what point we got a case in Australia at the moment, Ben Robert Smith. Some people say he's a hero. Some people say he did war crimes. Some people say, no, that man needs to answer for these crimes. Did he do war crimes? That's what we're trying to establish now. Did he commit what he was accused of? Is he a hero or is he a villain? Like, that is why evidence matters. But also, are we ready to hear the truth of that? You know, if it comes out that this man, like, if we're saying that he shot him, he did something. What are we saying? Like, what's the context behind that? This is why evidence matters. This is why you need to look at evidence. If it was an armed person and they were helping us and it was someone that was no threat to whatever, then a lot of people will say, okay, why did you do that? That was wrong. That was morally wrong. We need to hold you accountable for that. But then you have to also look at the other side of the system. What if it posed a threat? What if this person was posing a threat, or Ben Robert Smith acted in a way that was upholding his belief of the system? This is why evidence separates. This is why Ben Robert Smith in Australia at the moment is such a polarizing topic. And I'm not afraid to touch the polarizing topic. I will mention it. You need to look at both sides of the reality. You need to look at both sides. You need to look at what's getting said on Ben Robert Smith's side, what's getting said by the army, what's getting said by the people who were there, what evidence is backing of that. What do we say to that? How do we establish a baseline here? How do we establish what was right and wrong? How do you distinguish from fog of war? How do you do all that? And there's also another good movie, while I'm talking about A Few Good Men, that I want to bring out. Where is it here? I believe it is, where is it? Full Metal Jacket, there it is. Full Metal Jacket tells us about the death of innocents in a war setting. You know, this is about the Vietnam War. We see people, obviously Hartman is a great character, but we see, you know, Private Pyle and picking on, what's his name? Vincent D'Onofrio's character. Private Pyle. What is that, a jelly donut? And he just gets picked on that whole movie. And we see how his squad mates, these people who's training with him, essentially turn on him because they are getting punished for him. And we see people fall apart in this movie under enormous pressure. We see the Vietnam War, where if you haven't seen Full Metal Jacket, I would suggest you maybe skip a bit ahead or something. But we see Joker at the end of this movie lose a part of his innocence because he does something that he feels like he has to do. And we see that, and we see, like, okay, in that scenario, your friend just got killed in a way, and you find out it's this person, and the person who it happened to was saying do it, and then his party that's with him at the time says, that's heavy, Joker, heavy, Joker. And then at the end you see them singing Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse. You know, it's sort of like that death of innocence. And you look at that in war settings especially. You look at that in war settings. When you're exposed to war, when you're exposed to that, a part of your innocence does die. And it becomes very hard to return to reality. You see a lot of veterans struggle. A lot of our people who come back from war. In Australia, in the UK, in the US, no matter where you are in the world, veterans see a lot of stuff. People who are considered war heroes see a lot of stuff that we don't see. Public might not see this stuff. And we have to ask ourselves, what were they exposed to? How do they make calls on the fly that might protect 1 million people? How do they distinguish who is dangerous and who isn't? How do they distinguish right from wrong in a setting where right from wrong might be so blurred to a point? This is why with our veterans, PTSD is very real. PTSD is very real in these sort of scenarios. It's why veterans come back from war and need more assistance. It's why our diggers, or whoever, we call them diggers in Australia because World War I, we were digging trenches in Gallipoli. But also, Australia's been in wars, you know, Afghanistan and that, and Iraq. And when I look at army personnel, we all look at them like, okay, this person had a job, they went and were part of that system. But we don't look at the reality. We don't look at, what did this person see? When they were stationed in Afghanistan, what did they see? That's what we don't ask. That's where we start questioning what is real, but what is false. Okay, they had a job. They were army personnel. They were military. They were Navy. They were the Air Force. But what did they see? What were they exposed to? Maybe they lost their best friend in combat. Maybe it changed a part of them. I am very much a fan of helping veterans. I'm very much a fan of our systems, especially with funding, need to look at mental health when people get back from war, especially ex-ground troops. If they were stationed in a very heavy war environment, or even somewhere where that could have played out, where they might have been exposed, you need to look after those people. And right now I feel our systems, especially in the army sense, I was never in the army, but I do have a deep respect for our army in Australia. I don't think our systems are built to help people like that. I don't think systems respond fast enough. But that's enough about army, because I will continue, because I absolutely love how... I know some people are like, oh, where's our army in modern thing? Where's our army stationed? What's our army's purpose? They shouldn't be fighting. Our army protect our freedom. And I'm sorry if that rubs you the wrong way, but I look at them as sometimes there are heroes in amongst that. There are people who struggled to cope after going to World War II. After going to World War I, imagine you're in the trenches of Gallipoli. People went straight over the top of those trenches before you, because what was happening in Gallipoli with our, what we call diggers, with our troops, they were going over the top of the trenches based on British orders. A lot of people were like, send them over, we got to push forward the line, because we were fighting Gallipoli, we were fighting the Turkish. I think it was Turkish shores, Gallipoli, I believe that's Turkey. But you look at that. And what happens if your friend went over right before you, and then you're going over the top of the trenches next, but your one gets caught off? What sort of mental impact does that have on a person? This is why I'm counting army stuff in here. This is why I'm counting the army stuff. This is one of the most daunting realities that I think a lot of people ignore. Can you handle the truth? What did people see in war? How were they changed? You've got to look at all the aspects. You can't just see, this person went to war and, you know, Ben Roberts-Smith accused of something. I'm not going to comment on that too much, but Ben Roberts-Smith is accused of something. Was he justified in his actions? Did he do those actions? What was the evidence backing that? But also, what's the truth? Who was this person? He's accused, if it's found that he did commit something like that. Who was the person? I want to know more about that. Who were they? What threat did they pose, if any? If they didn't pose a threat, then yes, okay, maybe we do need to hold Ben to account. That being said, maybe it's saved, maybe the next day there was something being planned and that stopped something else major from happening, like something where a lot of life would have been lost. How do you make those distinguishments? How do you distinguish from that? How do you make those calls? It's a hard one. It's probably why I've never joined the army. I've thought about it for a lot of time, but I don't know if I can make those calls. I don't know if I would be able, under those circumstances, to say, okay, this person poses a threat to national security, and, you know, national is our army, and armies are always part of the federal stuff. But when you're looking at the overall, what it achieves, sorry if I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I just have to talk about it. It's one of the most daunting topics that I don't think we acknowledge as a society. Our forces, how our forces react, how our forces see things, and what is right and wrong in a scenario where you might say this person was a threat. They might say this person was a threat. There was something we found that clarified that this was going to happen if this person was alive still. That's a call that someone might make. Some people might say, no, they should have been taken to the courts. It's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing, and that's what's getting analysed with Ben Roberts-Smith at the moment in our courts. It's a touching topic, and I'm not picking a side in that one because my opinion, I don't have an opinion on that. I want to see the evidence. I want to see who the person was. I want to see if he is guilty of what he's accused of, or if he's not guilty of what he's accused of. That's why I believe in our systems. That's why I've talked for the past like 10, 15 minutes about our systems, our legal systems. But the next thing I want to talk about is mental health aspects, because I've just talked about our army aspects. But what about mental health overall? Because there's a lot of movies that also address mental health. The first one I'm going to go to is Requiem for a Dream. I'm taking deep breaths because this is a daunting video. This is a very hard video to film. It's a very hard video to film. I'm talking about topics here that I don't think we give enough recognition to, and they are in our movies, they are in our entertainment. This movie is very much about use, like, you know, people who are very much on substances. And it looks at those journeys of Sarah Goldfarb, Harry Goldfarb, what's his name? The Wayne's brother, Marlon, is it? Marlon Wayans, and then Ellen Burstyn. You know, you look at these characters, you look at that, and you look at the reality of what drugs can do. Not so much the ones that your doctor gives you. You know, I know, what's that thing? Jefferson airplane. Not the ones your mama gives you. The ones that don't do anything at all or whatever. I'm talking about like things in here. You know, mental health, addiction. It's very real. And you look at these aspects, addiction is very real. We see so much where our systems will ask someone like, oh, that person's on drugs or something. But our systems don't ask why. They don't ask what's the mental health aspect. Why is this person looking for a way out? It's surprising that people can look at that sort of substance like, okay, substances, hard substances, they're bad for the systems. But also they look at alcohol and say, no, alcohol's fine. Is that really, you know, this is escapism. This is about escape. I don't look at someone on substances and say, okay, very bad. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as like, okay, someone has told me they're on those or they are actively doing those. I look at it as, okay, you've told me this now. Why? What does it help with? Maybe they have a injury that was never addressed. Maybe they have something that was needing assistance to cope. Maybe it was recommended by their doctor. Maybe their doctor recommended it and they got onto it through their doctor. But this is why doctors need to monitor stuff like this, because it can get out of hand very quickly, much with gambling as well. There's a scene in 007 in Casino Royale. Let me get it out of here if I can. It's very shoved in. There's a scene in Casino Royale where he's playing, what's his name? Latroff or Lestat? I don't know. Lestat's the vampire. Why am I saying Lestat? I don't know, but you know the guy I'm talking about, Michael Marsden, is it? Is it Mads Mikkelsen, sorry. But, you know, there's a scene where they're gambling and Bond misreads what it is. Bond misreads that, you know, Daniel Craig misreads it. Very much gambling addiction, you know, there's gambling addiction associated with that. You think you know. You think if you play one more hand, you're going to win. There's another great movie with Matt Damon called Rounders. Now, it's a dangerous movie. It's a very dangerous movie if you look at that and are inspired. But it tells you that, okay, Matt Damon plays one more hand, and it tells you, oh, he won or whatever. He won when he did one more hand. Not everyone wins one more hand. Sometimes gambling means people lose their house. Sometimes gambling leads to that. Drugs as well. People need that hit and they don't care about everything else. They just need to get to that next hit. I don't look at drug addiction the same way as everyone else. I don't look at it. I think it's a problem, but I don't think it's the problem. I think we need to look at it as, is mental health support really there? Are people getting expected to reach out to systems? You might say mental health support's there for anyone who wants it. But what about intervention? What about someone who has been so taught by society that reaching out for help is wrong? That's what I need to ask you about. Like, what if mental health aspects aren't always self-accessible? What if it takes intervention? What if it takes intervention to give people that help? This video is more about reality. You know, I'm talking about multiple realities here. I'm talking about lived realities, people in court systems. I'm talking about, you know, fog of war. I'm talking about computer systems, people living in computers, living in cameras. How do you address mental health aspects? We look at a great movie like The Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, not the second one, but the first one. I haven't seen the second one. But we look at this movie. This is a movie that resonates with so many people. It resonates because, look, a lot of people aren't going to do what the Joker did in this movie. A lot of people aren't going to do what the Joker did. Not everyone who needs help is going to do what the Joker did. I'm going to say that. So don't tie people into that label, because people are so quick to label everything. Why the Joker is such a daunting task with mental health is because so often we see someone who needs that help, who's screaming for help, who might be wearing a smile, but deep inside, that smile is hiding a lot of things. Robin Williams. Sorry, I need to mention this. I will say up front that if Zelda Williams, his daughter, was to ever see this, I'm going to do this very respectfully, so I hope that the people who are close with Robin Williams, I hope that this perspective is respectful. I'm going to try to do it very respectfully, so stick with me here, because I do need to talk about it. One of the happiest men in cinemas, one of the funniest men in the world. One of the funniest men in the world. A lot of our favourite actor, Mrs. Doubtfire, you know. I liked Bicentennial Man. I did like Bicentennial Man. You know, I haven't watched Hook since my childhood. I do remember I have watched Hook before. So I've said one time in an old video that I don't think I've ever watched Hook, but I have. I remember there's aspects of that movie where I'm like, okay, yeah, I probably did watch it when I was a kid, but I'm talking like 30 odd years ago at this point, you know. But Flubber, you know, Flubber's another great movie. We look at Robin Williams. We remember Robin Williams. Someone who was so happy, who made us all happy, you know? He's someone who... Robin Williams is someone who, if you ask someone who's deeply unhappy, a lot of us never would have said Robin Williams. We never would have said Robin Williams. You know, look at that smile. We never would have said Robin Williams. And yes, there was diagnoses there and stuff like that towards the end of his life where he felt like he would have been a burden or something. There's similar things going on right now with, I don't know if it's the exact same diagnosis or whatever, but Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is still here with us. And, one second, let me just get that off my screen. Bruce Willis is still here with us. But Bruce Willis is very much, his family have said, like, he doesn't really even, he's starting to not remember. He's starting to get to that point. And when going back to Robin Williams, mental health aspect of that, he ended things on his own terms, which I think a lot of us feel, some people say, oh, that was selfish of him. He was probably in pain. When I look at Robin Williams, I see something of how did our society let Robin Williams get to that point? How did he get to the point? It's a sad reality with Robin Williams. And yeah, Zelda Williams, his daughter, has called out AI and said, I don't want him ever being used for AI. Like, he's not here anymore. They don't have the same mannerisms as Robin Williams. You can train an AI to be perfectly looking like him, but comedic timing like Robin Williams, you don't get that. Just because it looks like him doesn't mean it is them. But Robin Williams is a very sad one. I think it still hits a lot of us very hard. Robin Williams to us is the funniest man alive, or was the funniest man alive. And he succumbed to what happened, you know. He succumbed to learning something about maybe his health. We don't know exactly what it was that was the final straw for him. We don't know what it was. But we look at Robin Williams and we look at it to learn. We look at, okay, some of the happiest people in the world might be deeply unhappy. I went and saw Linkin Park twice this year in March with, what's her name in it? The female singer, Emily. Now, I'm a fan of Linkin Park. I got into Linkin Park really. I did listen to Linkin Park back in the day, but I was always a bit more into Biscuit and that. So Linkin Park was there. I did like their songs, but I was always more into stuff like Limp Bizkit, like Korn, like nu metal. I didn't really start getting into Linkin Park until about 2020 or 2021, when the world changed. You know, the world shut down for a bit. And then you start seeing a lot of like depression come through. You see a lot of people who struggled during that era. You see a lot of stories from that era. And you look at cases like, Chester Bennington was so deeply unhappy when he was here. He put a lot of it in his music. You can hear it. When you listen back to Chester Bennington, the reason why Given Up hits so hard when he's screaming, "Get me out of my misery," the reason it hits so hard is because it's believable. It's there. It's for all to see. For those who know what to look for. With Robin Williams too, people probably close to Robin Williams were like, he's so happy. People probably close didn't really know this is what was happening behind the scenes. Because our societies are built not to see behind the scenes. They're not built to be... They're built to react. They're not built to intervene. That's how they're built. And you look at Donnie Darko. I don't know if I'm breaking or if everything else is breaking around me. It's one of the greatest quotes from this movie. You don't know if you're awake or asleep or whatever. That's also from Nightmare on Elm Street. But you don't know what's reality and what isn't. Sometimes things can be so distorted. Sometimes you don't know what reality is. Sometimes you don't know how to distinguish between two things. That's why intervention is so important. That's why, especially when I talk about our veterans, when we talk about use of substances, this is why when we talk about people in court systems, you need to make sure people are properly supported. And I know our systems aren't built to support properly. They're built for self-help. They're not built to intervene. And that's the problem. There's a very sad topic of the events of what happened at Bondi Beach or Bondi late last year in 2025. Now, there's a person in the court systems at the moment who is in jail, right where he belongs, rightfully so. I don't think anyone's ever asked, or some people might have, but what about the people who lost family members there? What about the people who lost people? Anytime a massive event like that happens, like a 9/11 in America, what about the human impact of the people still here? Things have knock-on effects. People, just because somebody's gone, doesn't mean the people around them don't feel it. I've mentioned it before, but a year ago I lost my cousin. It hit me very hard, to the point where it literally broke me. It broke me in half to lose my cousin. And I haven't really commented on it much since then, because I try to live in reality. I try to still be like, my cousin, what he stood for in my mind and what he did for me, I absolutely love my cousin. But also there's a part of me that's like, why did it hit me so hard? How was I at that point? I was a wreck. Even though in denial, you put on the face like Robin Williams. You put it on like the Joker and say, okay, hey everyone. But deep inside, you see Joaquin Phoenix in that Joker scene where he's trying to smile in the mirror and there's just like, My cousin, I got only one tattoo on my body, and it's my cousin's nickname. I'm someone who doesn't like to talk so much about stuff. I'm built that way. I'm not built to talk about mental aspects. I'm not here to talk about what it brings to the world. But also, I know systems aren't built. How do we change a system when the people who have the ability to speak up and change systems through their perspective are ignored or don't tell their side because they're afraid of what will be said about them? How do we change things? How do we change reality for the next generation? I don't think there's innocent or guilty sometimes. I think there is multiple truths. There are multiple times where multiple truths can be accepted. You can look at the impact of me losing my cousin, for example. I was deeply unhappy. I can also look at, okay, I want to use what I learned through that experience to help others. I'm just going to make sure this mic's still on real quick, but yeah, it is. Sorry, I had to do that because I needed to that was escapism, what I just did. It's a deeply unsettling topic. and you look through old messages, you still think they're here for a bit, even when they're not here anymore. You still think they are. I've still got my cousin added on Facebook. It does hurt. It hurts deeply. It hurts that I can't pick up my phone and message my cousin at 3 a.m. in the morning who would always be awake, and we'll just have a conversation. It hurts. That being said, I also need to look at it as like, my version of what my cousin was and who my cousin was might not be what everyone's version of my cousin was. It might be multiple different things. It might be multiple different versions of me that people might agree with and don't agree with. But I believe in being a good person. I believe in being authentic. There are times when you can brighten someone's day by doing something as simple as giving them chocolate or lollies and saying, hey, I've at no cost to you, I just bought a bunch of chocolate. Do you want some? Do you want a lolly? Like, you just want to see people smile, because even as you break inside, you want to see other people smile. And that's a character thing. I know people will say character, and who's to say what character means and all that. Robin Williams was one of the funniest men alive. And I think a lot of us look at him as an upstanding character. I don't think I've ever heard one bad thing said about Robin Williams. And yet, he still felt the need. There wasn't support. And maybe that was a choice he made. It's a very personal choice when someone does stuff like that. We look at stuff like, I'm going back to the movie thing because I got two movies here I want to address. You look at movies like The Batman. This is very much a gritty version of Batman. It's more along the lines of how Batman would exist in a real world scenario. Not in the superhero Batman versus superpowers or whatever. But like a Batman who, if you were just a normal man, you didn't have special powers, you were trained by the League of, I don't know if I can say assassins, maybe the League of Shadows. Let's just say call them the League of Shadows. I don't know if that's a different thing. It might be a different thing altogether, but you were trained by Ra's al Ghul. But you have no superpowers. You don't have the superpowers of Batman, of Superman. You don't have the endurance of the can run as fast as the Flash. You're just a man who's trying to clean up the city. You're very rich. I mean, for one, you're very rich, but, you know, I think this version gets it more along the lines of what a reality-based Batman would be. And that's why I'm so keen to see number 2 of this. We look at people making a difference, even in just normal humans. We look at our doctors, we look at our cops, we look at our forces, we look at our firemen. Firemen run into buildings that are going to collapse. Like, look at what happened in 2001. There's people who survived who said, I looked into the eyes of those firefighters going up the stairwell and they knew they weren't coming back down. They were going up and they weren't coming back. These people are heroes. These people clean up things. That doesn't mean vigilantism is right. I think our forces, our police force, are there for a reason. Do the police force always get it right? Not always. Do they get it right most of the time? I would say so. But there are times where one bad egg in the police force gives the entire basket a bad name. It happens with any system. Batman, the Batman, resonates because reality of Batman is he is just a man. He's not Superman. He's not superpowered. He's just a man with a lot of money who has a lot of systems, a lot of access to money, who wanted to do something different because systems cost him family. And that led to him studying under Ra's al Ghul. I've saved this one to last because this is going to be one of the most pressing movies to talk about. And sorry, I know I've been gone for an hour. I enjoy doing hour videos because it gives me a bit of time to suss out my thoughts and relay my thoughts in a better way. But David Fincher's Seven. I know a lot of people see this as polarizing now. I know a lot of people look at David Fincher's work on this movie. Even Blue Velvet. You look at Seven. It's talking about the 7 deadly sins. And this movie, there's a scene in it. It's towards the end of the movie. How do I do this? It's going to be a spoiler, so if you haven't seen 7, if you want to skip forward a bit or whatever, feel free to. But there's a scene towards the end of the movie where the final sin isn't committed by Kevin Spacey's character, John Doe. You know, it's committed by Brad Pitt in his character. Because there's something that happens. What's in the box? And, you know, so often things might be set up in a way to, when someone breaks, you would ask yourself, was Brad Pitt's character justified in the ending of this movie? At the end of the day, it's someone on the ground. It's someone who's literally under arrest. He continues talking, but something has just been revealed, a massive detail that places a giant fog over everything. This movie is so confronting, as is Mulholland Drive, as is Blue Velvet. But Seven is one of those movies that actually it questions what we would do as a society. It questions what you would do in this scenario. What is reality? How do you distinguish human nature from everything else? How do you look at a man who just lost everything in this movie and say, okay, we don't know how this movie was going, but also, how do you look at that movie? It's a dark ending. It's one of the darkest endings in cinema. It's one of the darkest endings in cinema overall. And, you know, bitterness and letting things go. Sometimes, even when it's in the moment, people feel the need and react in the moment. People don't think about consequences, especially with Seven. Like Brad Pitt didn't think about the consequences in that scenario. When everything is falling around him at that very moment, you see Morgan Freeman running towards him saying, "Give me your gun, put the gun down, put it down. If you do it, he wins." If Brad Pitt had just let it go, but he couldn't. He was in that zone of like, I just lost everything. How do we look at it? How do we look at that character? How do we look at what's happened? How do we look at it? What is reality in that situation? What is reality? What is reality? I'm going to say that a few times. What is reality? Bitterness you need to let go. Bitterness will alter our judgment. Bitterness will control us and consume us. Hate consumes people. Hate makes people do horrendous things to the world. Hate is very much something that is needing of intervention. You can't let people be unchecked with hate. But also, bitterness, hate, if you're holding on to something, you need to let it go. Healing does not come from hate. Healing comes from healing. Sometimes we look at Robin Williams. We look at Robin Williams leaving this plane of existence, leaving this world. And we say, oh, we wish he could still be here. We look at Bruce Willis, who's still here fighting the fight. Michael J. Fox as well. They may not be diagnosed with the exact same thing, but, you know, they are still here. But you have to think these people are going through deeply confronting realities. You look at someone like Stan Lee, what we've learned about Stan Lee at the end of his life. A lot of people are saying it's apprehensible what he went through from people looking after him. He's 90-something years old at that point, 99 or something, and he's still being forced to go and meet people, and, you know, that man should have been in a retirement home. It's like our moral thing is like, oh, we want to meet Stan Lee, yay! We want to meet these people. We want to meet Christopher Nolan. We want to meet James Cameron. We want to meet people. But that person, Stan Lee, he should have been along the lines of, hey, I'm retired, I don't want to do anything. He should have been respected. And, you know, it's a daunting thing for a lot of people to accept reality. It's a daunting thing. Multiple realities can exist. People did want to meet Stan Lee. Us as the fans wanted to meet Stan Lee. The Marvel guy, if you don't know who Stan Lee is, he wrote him and a lot of other people. He was the editor of Marvel, but there was a lot of other people under Marvel who also did the art and wrote some of the comics and a lot of that stuff. So it wasn't Stan Lee all alone. But When we think of Stan Lee, we think of Marvel. He is the essence of Marvel in a lot of people's minds. He was Marvel. And we learn about people who were looking after him. We learn about those people. Those people were looking at, okay, let's get him where he needs to go because we are organised this thing, the fans want to meet him, this and that. But there's also a thing of like, he said he might not have wanted to do it. There's so often where performers get up in age of like, singers will get up there in age and say, I literally can't do it anymore. There's been a confronting thing the past couple of weeks where people are saying, should Frankie Valli retire? Is he retired? Frankie Valli put out a statement saying, I'm not retired, regardless of what anyone says. I'm not retired. Some people said he should be, but that's Frankie Valli's choice. But you have to look at what happens overall, reality. That's the point of this video. And I'm going to pick up all the things I've referenced here real quick so we can see them all in one shot, one beautiful big shot, and we'll talk about it. We're going to talk about this real quick. This video, over the course of an hour, has shown us a lot about realities. Even though this is very much fictionalized reality, you know, this tells us that there are multiple things with reality. And what is false and what is not real. Multiple things can be true. And, yeah, you know, there is a lot of things with that movie collection. I'm just looking at it off to the side here. To Kill a Mockingbird, you know, and all the jail ones I mentioned, you know, they force us to confront harsh truths. They also confront us with, maybe we don't have all the facts. One-Armed Man, maybe we don't have all the facts. Maybe we need to gather those facts. Maybe we do find new evidence to support those versions of reality. But that doesn't mean you should just shut yourself off to the world and say, my version of reality is the right version and I am not hearing any other perspectives. Lack of perspective is damaging to society. Movies tell us perspective. This all tells you perspective. You can go through this. I think why did I put The Fabelmans up here? I'm positive that's kind of like a biographical. It's inspired by Steven Spielberg's own childhood. We learn a bit more about Steven Spielberg. But while I'm on this topic, The Fabelmans, we learn about Steven Spielberg a bit. Like, it's not necessarily him one-to-one, but we learn a bit about him. We learn about realities. We learn about stuff like, where is it right here? It's somewhere in amongst all this. And it's going to be one of the hardest shelves to get out. Of course it is. Because it's jammed in so packed and I don't know how to get it out. There we go. We've got it a bit out now. That'll help. That'll help. But since I'm on Steven Spielberg, I'm going to bring it out. We look at the realities of that. We look at the realities of what we would have done in that scenario. Now, there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of perspective in the world because one region of the world has polarized some people's perspective. But people are people. Not everyone agrees with that region of the world, what's going on right now. We can still look at World War II and say this was evil. What was getting done was evil. But that tells us about our perspective on the world. That helps us shape our understanding of reality. Imagine if burning books was allowed to stand and we didn't learn anything from those books. Imagine if we changed things to the point where reality was so distorted that we would never be able to find the truth even if we knew what to look for. Imagine if all supporting evidence was burnt. Things like movies tell us about humans, tell us about society, tell us about humanity, and tell us about reality. They tell us about reality. And I know I've went on for an hour, I know this is becoming a bit preachy, but I do care about this stuff. I truly care about this stuff. I don't harbor hate towards anyone. I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I do admit that I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But, you know, I can sit here and say, okay, I like to look at my perspective overall. I like to understand different perspectives, even when they are confronting to me. I like to understand perspectives. That doesn't mean like if someone's, like there are people I don't want to talk to, but if they came to me and said, you need to understand my perspective, I would listen. That is what is about growth. And at the same time, I would encourage them to listen to what I have to say, you know. I've done an hour-long video. Perspectives matter. This is why movies matter. Perspectives matter. And when you're looking at film, perspectives truly do matter. Outside of books and music, movies is the most visible expression of art and who we are as people. And we look at our film industry as like, the Odyssey is taking off the box office. Who are we? There's no great people in that. I don't want to see it. It's not in IMAX. You look at that. It tells us about, okay, as an art form, we want to see movies relayed on screen. We want to see experiences. We want people to embrace and endorse us. We want to. It's human nature to crave endorsement to the point where we will alter our own characteristics to be liked. But then are you truly still yourself? I can sit here and say, I'm not perfect. I can admit I'm not perfect. So many people can also admit they're not perfect. So many people cannot. And that's a personal thing. It's not saying that people are right or wrong. It's not saying that everyone needs to believe one side or two sides or whatever. It's just saying that things are not as black and white as people like them to be. Movies show that. Movies show that where's the thing here? I've been watching a lot of clips from this movie the past couple of days because I've been meaning to rewatch it. I really want to rewatch it. The Darkest Hour. Gary Oldman as what's his name? Winston Churchill. It's a fascinating movie, and you ask yourself, in that situation, you're getting given favorable terms. You're saying, okay, X, Y, and Z is happening, but we need to stop our forces from this war, destructive war. But at the same time, you look at what's happening in Dunkirk. You look at what's happening in that region. Look at World War II overall. We can sit here and look at art forms. We can look at perspectives. This is why it's so important. Multiple perspectives should always be called upon to gain the full picture. And sometimes it's always in between. The truth is somewhere in between it all. This is where it all comes together. I can hear Steven Spielberg's interpretations. I can hear Christopher Nolan's stance on Dunkirk. I can hear Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill. I can hear about how The Matrix sees our need for technology as very dangerous. I can see To Kill a Mockingbird as our systems are not always adequate to deal with everything. I can look at They Live as we are becoming a product. We are told constantly to consume. I can look at The Truman Show, because I'm a YouTuber, and say, I'm posting too much. I'm relying too much on the monetization, which is why I turned monetization off. I'm still a monetized channel. I can turn it back on at any given time I want, as long as they've changed all the rules now, which it's 8,000 hours you need to get, coming in from 2027, I believe. But also, there was a time where I was just asking, am I doing this for love? I mean, an hour-long video. I never would have posted an hour-long video if I was doing, okay, I need to post it once every 2 days. I never would have done an hour-long video. Because you're on that cycle. You're trying to get more posts. You're trying to get the videos up there. Not everyone's going to watch an hour-long video. But you're the character. You're Truman. As a YouTuber, you're Truman. On social media, if you're an influencer on YouTube, on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, you're Truman. I'm not on TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account. I only have my Instagram account, Jamie Toomey Live. Jamie Toomey, that's the old channel name. Jamie Toomey, what's my thing? Presents. Jamie Toomey Presents. I was also the physical way for a bit, in case some of you remember that. Throwback. A lot of us are Truman. We're living our lives like this. Posting every perspective of our day while we're still there. If someone didn't like you, this is what you're taught when you start getting some recognition. Don't post where you are. Wait 24 hours or wait until you're away from there or at home. Then post, hey, I went and saw a movie. Don't do it while you're actively there. Because people will say, oh, I don't like this guy. He's down there. Let's go. You don't post it while you're there. And so much of us forget about our whole lives are online. So many of us are plugged into the systems. So many of us would fight to defend the systems because we're reliant on them. Agents, we will fight to defend AI. We will fight to defend, RAM is $900 a thing. That's ridiculous. That being said, I'm still keeping my ChatGPT, or I'm still keeping Gemini, or I'm still keeping my AI counterpart, Grok, or whatever it is. People will still fight to defend the AIs, but then complain about, why is RAM $1,000? Consumerism, but also that. These are all realities. This is reality. I've went for over an hour and like 10 minutes at this point. I'm going to wrap it up. Tell me about what you took away from this video, because it's not all over the place, even though sometimes it does seem like it. I tried to tie it all together to reality. Reality, what's reality or what's fiction? What do you see when you look at movies? What is reality? Tell me what you took away from this video. I would love to hear you in the comments. That being said, I do still ban people. If they get out of line and say something stupid in the comments, I will still ban people because it's my channel. I need to ensure that people have a safe space in my own thing, in my own channel. And that's not always saying like, okay, I can try to create a safe space for people. People are still going to find loopholes and workarounds. When I see it, I try to clean it up. When I don't see it, fair enough, people will bring it to my attention. I'm not perfect. I admit I'm not perfect. I just try to do the best I can. And sometimes that's not always what people want to hear. I just try to be the best version of myself I can be. That's not always, people don't always get the best version of me, but I try. I try. I wear a smile. I bring people lollies and drinks and, I bring people stuff because I want to see them smile. Not because there's an agenda, not because I want something in return, just because I like to see people smile. And going back to what I said about me, because a lot of people are going to say, you kind of addressed it, but you're not really addressed it. When I lost my cousin last year, I was broken. I was broken in half. 2025 was a very hard year for me. My cousin was a huge part of my upbringing. It was hard. And I survived it. And I don't like to say what I survived because obviously at that point you're talking about things that I don't really want to talk about. There's stuff in there that I don't really want to talk about, getting the name on the wrist, that's quite an evident place to get a tattoo, isn't it? There's stuff in there I don't want to admit. There's stuff in there I don't want to talk about because the reality is just so confronting that it's just hard to look at. It's hard to do it without, triggering myself into sadness again. Mental health matters. I've shown it across here. It also making sure that you're living the best version of your life. I'm not saying you need to go in and exercise and get 10,000 kilos because that's what society expects of us. I'm saying you need to be happy in your own skin. You need to be happy with yourself. You need to be happy with who you're seeing in the reflection. Or at this point, because I'm filming on the front lens, I always film on the front lens. Who I'm seeing in the camera right now, who I'm seeing. I try to do my best. I try. Not everyone agrees with that. Not everyone needs to see that stance. Not everyone needs to agree. But then that just tells you that maybe those people aren't meant to come with you on your journey. Sometimes it's hard when we lose someone. Sometimes it's hard when you lose someone and you feel that the people who were there, who should have been the ones to help you stand back up, let you fall even harder. And I don't think that's a thing to hold on to. People freeze in a moment. People freeze when you fall apart. People freeze and don't know how to react. That's what's been taught to us throughout the movies I've just referenced, How do you react when you're in Brad Pitt's shoes in Seven? How do you react? You wouldn't know what to do either, or I think a lot of people wouldn't. that's where I want to end it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll put a couple end screens here. If you want to watch them, feel free to. If you don't, I'm glad you stuck with me for this whole video. It has been a rather long one, probably my longest video to date. And yeah, tell me what you took away from this video down in the comments. Let me know. I don't really know what to say other than thanks for watching and peace. I will catch you in the next one.